freaking first cut. Golly.
Welcome to the First Cut Podcast. I'm Rick Gehman, and this is your DFS preview for this week's Valero Teas Open. And joining me to break it all down, Greg DuCharme is here. Greg, what's up?
Oh, this is an interesting week for me for a couple of reasons. Reason one, this feels a little bit like the last final before summer vacation. Right, I feel like it's a little hard to focus on the task at hand. My mind is, full disclosure, my mind's on summer break, which is it's far from a break, but it's on Masters. And this is that last final, right? You got to make sure that you're focused. But as I look through the field today, I'm kind of excited about this. I think it's going to be a great tournament, and I'm very interested in this player pool. So I'm excited to break it down today.
The player pool got one golfer weaker. We'll talk about that here earlier. That news breaking on Monday. And Nejad joins us. Sia, what's going on?
How are you, fellas? Greg, Rick. Can I just say my compliments on Sunday's recap show from last night? If anybody hasn't heard it, you really have to go back and watch it or listen to the podcast. You all covered WGC Match Play, Corrales. You covered a little bit of Valero, a little bit of the Masters, and the icing on the cake, Greg DuCharme's NERF basketball prowess was absolutely the headliner. Please go back and listen to that show.
Greg, the feedback we got about your NERF skills, it was like the highest engagement of anything we've done all year long.
Wow. Well, I'd love to know more. Maybe we could talk a little more about that off. I mean, I'm very interested in hearing what all the feedback was, but I will say, as I further reflect at my legacy, my career, I'm now retired, hopefully only for a little bit of time. But dunk contest, 3-point contest, one-on-one games were a big deal. Free throw all of that was, I would say that I mastered in my home gym. And my poor dad, I think about this now. I have 2 kids now, under 3, and my 3-year-old, when I come home, is, "Oh, daddy. He's so excited to play. Can we come play cards with me? Come." And it's like, geez, dude, I just had a 12-hour day. Can I have a minute? And I did the same thing. My dad would come home. "Okay, Dad, we're going to play one-on-one upstairs. Go get changed. We're playing a 50 in a one-on-one game." And he'd never said no. So yeah, it's great times.
Have you passed the NERF torch onto your own children yet? I know one is probably can't hold a NERF ball yet, but have you started that process?
I've tried. I do have a NERF hoop hanging in the house, and maybe one day if I'm ever in the other in the downstairs place, I'll show you. In fact, you can actually see the one basketball hoop that I always have behind me, and then we have another one. So we're set up, the groundwork is laid, and we're working it in slowly. Right now, it seems to be more like Hot Wheels seem to go into the hoop a little bit more than a basketball, but we're making some progress.
Progress is all I ask for. We've got some stuff to give away. How about this? Am I reading this right? We're giving away year-long subscriptions to Sportsline, and all you have to do is pick the winner of the 2021 Masters. That's right. We love the Masters, and we want to give some love back to the people. So go write a 5-star rating and review in Apple Podcasts for The First Cut, obviously. Leave your Twitter or Instagram handle so we can get in touch with you. And then tell us who's going to win the 2021 Masters. Here's the kicker. Producer Jacob tells me he will give a year-long subscription, Sia, to literally anyone who gets the winner right. So if we have to give out like 1,000 of these things, we're going to have to give them out. You get it right, you get a year-long subscription to Sportsline.
That's quite the deal. I think everybody should be participating in that. If you all know how good Sportsline has been doing, and it kind of always does, you're going to want to get a piece of that.
Yeah, a year is also a very long time. That's not just for golf. That's for all the sports. It gets you rocking and rolling. And then finally, you know what's going on. The madness continues into its final weekend, and the Eye on College Basketball podcast remains your audio guide for the entire NCAA tournament. Gary Parrish and Matt Norlander, not Nat Morlander, which is what I was going to say, will offer extensive previews and breakdowns of the Final Four and the national championship game. If you want the best March Madness analysis, follow the Eye on College Basketball podcast anywhere you find this one. Gentlemen, it's Valero Texas Open Week. Greg, as you mentioned, this is an event that might be a little bit of a look-ahead game, but we are at TPC San Antonio, the place that we have been since the start of 2010. And what I want to do is I'm actually going to pull up some data visualizations from my site here, Greg, from rickrungood.com, so we can talk through TPC San Antonio. I can point out things as we go along here, be a bit more interactive with the chat. Hey, if you want to talk about Carlos Ortiz, I see you in the chat. We'll get to Carlos Ortiz, but Greg, let's start with what we expect from TPC San Antonio this week.
This is, I find it to be an interesting course. It's a Greg Norman design. You get some Bermuda grass greens that are a little on the slopey side. So I think of some past winners. I think of Corey Connors. I think of Charlie Hoffman. I think of some ball strikers like that. But then you have a guy like Jordan Spieth who's had some success there. Zach Johnson, who's won back-to-back times there. There seems to be a pretty wide array of past champions at this event. And I think it's a sign of a good golf course. I don't think it particularly gives an advantage to long hitters. I don't think it gives a particular advantage to a specific type of player. So what that means is that everybody's in the mix. Everybody can compete. I wouldn't look past some of the older players, maybe even a couple guys that are over 50. We'll talk about that a little later on, I promise you. But I'm definitely interested in seeing how this pans out, because you got everybody from Dustin Johnson, and you have a whole mix of guys underneath that who are vying for kind of that last spot of the Masters.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And Greg, it passes the eye test for you to say that there's not really a stat that stands out, because Sia, the model that I talk about, all the time, the one where I run every single stat against every result for every course, says that there's not really anything that's strongly correlated to success at TPC San Antonio. Sometimes we see, hey, it's strokes gained putting. This is the most important stat. Or strokes gained off the tee. Or you have to be long. This week, it's like, yeah, around the greens, kind of important. Driving accuracy, it's okay. But Greg's right. There's really not any standout mold of golfer that you would want to try to roster this week.
Yeah, and to your point, if I was going to, create a model and bump up some percentages, it probably would be a little bit to around the green, a little bit to driving accuracy. And of course, approach is always important. It's always in play. But that speaks to what Greg was saying. I mean, this is really a wide open tournament. I mean, there's guys that are previous winners in the 7K range that can take this thing down. There's guys in the 8K and the 9K range, obviously, that are viable to outright win this thing. And now that we don't have, Dustin Johnson anymore, it really makes it a little bit easier to A, formulate your lineups, and B, kind of pick out a winner that isn't like the best player in the world.
Yeah, let's go over to the cheat sheet. Let's look at the guys over $10,000, because there is a big void at the top of this player pool now, Greg, because Dustin Johnson, about an hour ago as we record this, said, thanks, but no thanks. I'm going to take the week off. I'm going to head to Augusta National. But of course, he does that after the pricing has already come out. So he's 11,800. He gone. Tony Finau is now 11,000. Jordan Spieth is 10,700. Scotty Scheffler 10,400. Hideki Matsuyama 10,100. Let's talk about DJ real quick, Greg, because would you have considered him for this week? And how much differently does this change your lineups moving forward?
Yeah, I was strongly considering him. I had a feeling that he was in this event kind of with, I don't want to say revenge in mind. That's probably strong, but there was a frustration level. There was a disappointment level from the week before. What's so fascinating is he's a late entry and then a late withdrawal, right? So that doesn't really, it tells me, it almost proves the point that he was in this event for an emotional reason. He made an emotional decision after losing to Kevin Na on Friday, and it gets him into the event. And then all of a sudden, once he calms down, he says, you know what, it's probably not the best idea. I think I need to take this week off to best prepare for Masters. So yes, I did like him. I saw something in DJ last week where I felt like he really cared. He was really grinding it out in his matches, and I think that would have been a great thing for him this week. So I think honestly, it makes this lineup a little bit easier. It gives you a big break. I think it highlights a guy like a Jordan Spieth, and it even brings in the possibility of starting in the 9K range. So it opens the board wide. The board becomes wide open, where DJ would feel to me before this like it was kind of hard to pass on him. at least in all of your. I mean, it's hard to pass on him in total. A couple of lineups you're going to have to at 11-8. But yeah, I was definitely looking at DJ this week.
That leaves us, Sia, with Finau, Spieth, Scheffler, Matsuyama. I imagine many are going to opt and to just flock to Spieth. Is that the direction that you're headed in?
Yeah, if you're taking somebody from this range, I think Spieth would be the number one guy. I mean, Scotty Scheffler's an interesting one. I know you had mentioned earlier in the day, Rick, that maybe he ends up just sitting this one out after 7 rounds.
Yeah, we haven't heard that news yet, and it's kind of late on Monday at this point, so I guess he's playing. I was expecting a Monday morning withdrawal from Scotty Scheffler. Haven't seen it.
Yeah, and we'll see. I mean, obviously, if anybody can rebound, I mean, he's kind of like an all-around athlete here. So, I mean, I think he can endure the 7 rounds and then, have a couple days off and then get warmed up for this Valero Texas Open. So, I would probably go in the order of Spieth and then Scheffler. I mean, these are both Texas boys too, so that helps. And then maybe Finau. I'm not really going to be on Hideki. I don't see the justification there. But like Greg said, I think I might start in the 9K range, which you guys know I like to do a lot too. And by the way, if I may, did DJ did he just realize that maybe like Kevin Na wasn't in this tournament? He's like, oh, he's not playing in it, so I'll just duck out. Like I'll wait for the Masters.
He literally rage registered. Like you rage quit like a video game, right? When things are going sour and you're like, I'm gone. Just like flip off. He was like, I just got beat by Kevin Na and I just failed to get out of my group and I have like 10 minutes to get myself into the Valero and take it out on the rest of the field. And he gets in, puts his name in, and then he, sleeps on it again. He's like, nah, I'm good. I'm just going to go to Augusta now. That's exactly what I think happened.
It's your classic tilt register for those in betting circles.
For sure. Greg, here's the round by round breakdown for Jordan Spieth. And what I'm pointing out is essentially since the Farmers Insurance Open, this is the visual that Kyle Porter has been tracking essentially since Farmers. These 2 rounds right here, the 3rd round at Genesis and the 4th round at Genesis, are the only 2 rounds he has lost strokes on approach since January 28th. Greg, this is an unbelievable stretch of golf that he is on, and he's doing it in a way that is highly sustainable.
Right. Well, it's the iron play that is the biggest thing. And when you look at, this is a guy with 4 top 10s since what happened at the Waste Management Phoenix Open. Well, we kind of, at that time, we jumped on the bandwagon. And this was why there were signs in the positive direction. So I look at Jordan Spieth and I see what was wrong and what has he done to fix it. And it kind of has a contrast to what happened last year. Last year, when we came back to the Charles Schwab Challenge, he came in tied 10th and he was around the lead on Sunday, and there was a lot of buzz about it. And at the time, I wasn't on board. I didn't jump on the bandwagon, and the reason was he was still missing to the right. He still hits the tee shot out of bounds to the right on 14. There's still the double bogey possibility, and he was still fighting the same things that caused the slump in the past. He just was at a course he was very familiar with. Well, in this case, now all of a sudden, we've seen a guy eliminate double bogeys. He's eliminated the big miss to the right. Not to say that he doesn't miss any fairway to the right, but it's that shot that just goes all of a sudden almost out of bounds to the right. And every miss seems to be to the left, which when you have a one-way miss, it's highly beneficial. The other thing is, while he's had rounds with great putting, it hasn't been consistent putting where he's just on fire with the putter and on a hot streak. And that's what you're saying, Rick, about the sustainability. He's doing it with tee to green play. He's doing it with smart play. And again, even though the driving numbers, his strokes gain numbers off the tee aren't where you may hope or where you may expect for a great tee to green player, he's keeping the ball in play where he has an opportunity to approach the green, and that's his strong suit right now. And that is what I believe will lead to another great week this week. And as Kyle said last night, probably a top 3 favorite going into Masters.
It's scary stuff. That leaves us in the 10K range, Sia, with Tony Finau and Hideki Matsuyama. Spolardi checks in the chat. He says Decky is a fade, and I want to throw this over to you, Sia, because Hideki's kind of been a bit of an enigma. I'm having a difficult time trying to figure him out, determining if I need to be a week early or if I need to wait and see. So I ask you, what do we do with Decky?
Well, what if you said that same comment a year ago about being a week early on Decky? You would have kept chasing that.
I'm still waiting.
Exactly. So I mean, I think we're at a point where it's kind of like, yeah, feel free to take that shot in a GPP. I don't mind the Hideki play if you got 5 or 10 lineups you want to throw him in one, but I mean, he's never really paying off his price. Yes, we know he's a great ball striker, but that's been kind of up and down. The putter's always up and down. So I mean, of all these elite guys, unless you're just trying to be super contrarian, just pay up the few $100 to Scheffler or the 600 to Jordan Spieth or pay down, of course, to that 9K range, because there's plenty of good ball strikers in this tournament. We don't need to keep saying, oh, Hideki, he's such a great ball striker, because right below him are guys we're going to talk about that are great ball strikers.
Yeah, you can see, Greg, there was a stretch from maybe the end of 2020 into the start of 2021 where Hideki kind of lost the iron game, the approach game. He's starting to get it back. He's gained strokes in 4 consecutive tournaments, but he doesn't have the driver that we have normally seen. And of course, the putter is always going to misbehave. So that's why I just see him as a big question mark. I don't even know what his floor is anymore, and I'm not even sure I know what his ceiling is anymore. I find him to be one of the most difficult guys to handicap.
I agree, and in name, he that name draws it has a heavy draw, and the reason for that is the floor has always been in the past very high. It's an extremely low miscut risk because of that ball striking ability, and he seems to have an ability in the past to play really well on Sunday. So he was great at getting kind of a backdoor top 10, top 12 finish with a nice round on Sunday, handles difficult setups pretty well because of that ball striking ability. But as that starts to dwindle, he doesn't have anything else to fall back on. And a lot of what I've seen out of Hideki is when he has played well, some really good short game stuff, chipping in a couple of times, getting up and down. And I'm just not sure that that's the recipe that I'm looking for here. When you have a guy who's very questionable with the putter and always has been, he has to be very good in the rest of the remaining areas of the game. And when those are in question, well, now everything's in question. So I'm a fade on Hideki as well.
Okay, let's jump down to the $9,000 range. So this is Abraham Answer, our defending champion, Corey Connors, Ryan Palmer, Cam Tringale, Charlie Hoffman, Brendan Steele, and Matt Kuchar. Sia, I'm looking at this. I'm looking over the recent results. I'm looking at the history over here on the cheat sheet, and I see guys who have won this golf tournament, namely Charlie Hoffman and Corey Connors. I see Matt Kuchar, who had a great week last week. Brendan Steele has also been victorious in this range. What do you want from the $9,000 section?
Yeah, the answer is I want everything, but so I obviously have to prioritize a little bit here. I mean, these are all kind of golfers I lean on a very consistent basis. So I think I'll surprise you a little bit here. This won't be a surprise because Corey Connors is a guy that, again, he's just been hot. He has a good history here. I'm going to be all over Corey Connors. And by the way, I don't think that's going to be... it's going to be a popular thing to be on Corey Connors. But a couple guys that I might fade just because I think they've sort of been priced maybe a little bit too high and I'll just find cheaper guys elsewhere. You guys know how big a fan I am of Ryan Palmer. I genuinely think he should have beat Jon Rahm in match play. He makes a 3-foot putt on maybe 14, I think it was, or 15. He's two shots up, or 2 holes up, and he probably closes out that match. As much as I like him, though, I typically like him when he's like 7,200 or 7,000, or nowadays he's getting priced up a little bit. But here, I don't think I want to pay for him, and I don't think I want to pay for Charlie Hoffman. I think both of those guys are going to be popular, rightfully so, particularly Hoffman with his experience and how he's sort of homegrown here in Texas. But I think the guys I'm going to be leaning on are probably Corey Connors, Abraham Answer, and Cameron Tringale, who I'm always taking Cameron.
Here's what I think the big thing is with Corey Connors here. So if you can see on the rickrungood.com golfer profile, this is Corey Connors year by year breakdown, Greg. Every single year, no doubt about it, he gains a half a stroke off the tee, he gains a half a stroke on approach, and he loses about that with the putter. Except for 2021, he's doing that little thing by just gaining a little bit with the flat stick. He's a 0 around the green player. He's a small positive putter. That's dangerous. This is literally what I'm showing on the screen right now. If Hideki could get on this trajectory, he'd be like the best player on the planet, but he's never been able to get into the positive. So this is a really good sign for Corey Connors this year.
I agree. And as I was looking earlier today, the putting is the thing Well, I mean, it's been the past couple of weeks, right? Corey Connors was a guy I thought would challenge Jordan Spieth in the match play. That didn't pan out the way that he hoped. And match play can be a different animal at times, but so that didn't pan out. But in the weeks prior, Corey Connors was highly sought after, and for good reason. You have great ball striking mixed with putting that's on the way up. What's he ranked strokes gained putting this year? Like 34th or something?
He's 79th.
79th, so a huge positive. He's never been inside the top 100 before, at least on my count. So look, I think Corey Connors is a guy improving, who has something figured out on the greens, and he is one of the few past champions that I look to in a positive light, because this one feels a little different. He didn't have the Valero Texas Open last year, right? So all of a sudden, and he doesn't have to Monday qualify anymore, which is kind of nice.
That's right. I forgot that he
Yeah.
got into this on Monday last year. I'm looking at another past champion, but I'm going all the way back to 2011, and it's Brendan Steele, who has yet to miss a cut in 2021. That's 8 in a row. He was the last man out. He was the last guy on the outside looking in at the match play. Eric van Rooyen gets in. Brendan Steele doesn't, but the last time we saw him was a third place finish at the Honda Classic. We know he had a close call at Sony. He's had 2 top 10s at Valero since his victory. I'm like, choo-choo, full steam ahead, Brendan Steele.
Yeah, I like Brendan Steele. And from a DFS standpoint, there's so many attractive options here that I think Brendan Steele might fall a little bit under the radar compared to the other guys. And yeah, his finishes, first of all, he's making cuts, but his finishes are great too. And if I recall at Honda, I mean, he obviously finished third, but he didn't have the best start to that tournament. He grinded away to a third place finish. So Brendan Steele, you've been saying this for I don't know how long, Rick. He's just one of those guys that he's not a sexy name. People just don't want to pick him, and you just keep scooping him up, and he keeps giving you what you want from a DFS standpoint. So frankly, the only reason I didn't say his name is because I had already said 3 guys in the 9K range, and I didn't want to like hog the whole thing. But I absolutely like Brendan Steele.
He has only once in this 8 tournament stretch been more than 10% owned. So you generally get him in single digit ownership, which is always a good thing. Okay, Greg, that leaves us with kind of the bottom of this 9K range. I think we got to talk about Kuchar. He's back in this field. He gets a significant price increase. He played 7 rounds over 5 days last week, and he still hasn't had a top 10 in a stroke play event since 2020 Genesis. That would have been over a year ago.
Yeah. I mean, look, this guy's 42 years old. It's very clear that he has figured something out. He and Chris O'Connell figured something out. But I worry about the fatigue. I think it's a big deal in an event like this. It's a short turnaround. He just played 7 rounds. He gave it his all in the match against Victor Perez and came out on top. Made 4 birdies in that Sunday after, which was maybe surprising. Maybe I'm overlooking the fatigue factor here. But the thing about Matt Kuchar is he's never relied on distance. So when you see a guy in his 40s start to lose form, the immediate thought is, oh, he doesn't hit it far enough to compete on today's tour. But that's not really the area that slipped. It slipped in his iron play. It slipped in his putting. It slipped in the other areas of the game where he just wasn't in good form. He wasn't swinging well. And what I saw this past week was a guy that was swinging really well, who was really clutch, who was putting really well. So he's got to be extremely confident. I worry about the fatigue factor. And when I'm looking at a group that has a guy like a Charlie Hoffman, a guy like a Ryan Palmer, who, as Sia pointed out, he should have won that match against. He just couldn't beat Jon Rahm. He couldn't get past. He's older than Jon Rahm, but it's almost like he was playing against his big brother, and he couldn't. He just couldn't close the deal. He just didn't want to. He didn't want to win that match. It was so that was kind of a different animal. But Ryan Palmer played some great golf last week and only had to play 3 matches. So because of him, because of Charlie Hoffman, I have a hard time going with Matt Kuchar and taking on that fatigue risk. Interested to hear your thoughts on what his popularity will be, because that could go one of two. Everybody could stay away because he played 7 rounds last week, or some people might say, well, he's playing well, he's back, I'm going to go with Kuchar. So interested to hear about that. But Charlie Hoffman, his record here is unbelievable. We have to talk about him. His record's unbelievable. He has 11 top 25 finishes in 14 starts at this event, including I think he was fifth in 2019. So I'm looking at Charlie, who's in rounding into good form, and I think he's almost a must play.
Okay, well, I'm glad that's your take because I think Sia's take is a little bit different. But let me set the table on this. Charlie Hoffman in the midst of his best, I will call it, let's call it ball striking season of his career, at least in terms of strokes gained approach. His strokes gained off the tee number is great as well. He's 18th on tour in the approach number, and Sia, he's putting together some great finishes. He was kind of terrible on Sunday at Punta Cana. He started the day, I think, 3 shots off the lead. He was in the thick of it. He finished 34th, so he obviously had a poor Sunday. I think you're concerned about either ownership or price, or maybe both.
Yeah, both. And that's the thing. So I've been on Charlie Hoffman for the majority of the last, 5 or 6 tournaments. We've talked about him on the show. But at the same time, like once you get to a range where you're 9,200, but more importantly, you are sort of stacked up against certain guys that are going to be less popular, like a Brandon Steele, like a Cameron Tringale. I don't know about Ryan Palmer. We'll have to see how that shakes out. But I just prefer, I think, those guys over Charlie Hoffman for 4 rounds here. I totally understand why you would take Charlie Hoffman, but for me, I'm just considering some ownership stuff too. So it's not like I think he's a bad play. I think I just prefer the ownership from other guys near him.
What do you expect that ownership to be? Like, is his form? Do you think people are that aware of his form where everybody's going to be running to Charlie Hoffman?
Well, I think they're going to look at his form, but also his history. I mean, in the last 4 years, he has a second and a first, and they're going to be like, "Oh, he's from Texas too. Oh, this guy is just kind of like killing this course." So I think that's where the ownership is going to come from, even more so than the recent form. They'll check that box too, of course. I just think he's probably going to be a little bit more popular than. I think he's going to be more popular than Steele, Tringale, maybe Palmer, not Connors, and maybe Answer as well. So if he's the second most popular guy in the 9K range, I just prefer to pivot somewhere else.
He was very popular last week. He was 28% owned for Punta Cana, which, while he was disappointing on Sunday, he's at least on that many people's radar. And then you're also going to throw in all of the tournament history. This is like the Charlie Hoffman Open. I think he's going to be in the 20s. Let's call it low 20s. That's my guess on a Monday, Greg. That's what.
So what if you did play Charlie Hoffman? And you paid that price for him, and he's in the low 20s in ownership percentage. What do you think he has to do to make that worth it?
Well, I would say he's got to finish inside the top 10, maybe inside the top 8, right? I think that's about right.
Yeah,
okay.
I think you'd have to get a top 10 out of him for sure.
Yeah.
And so then you got to go. What's the likelihood of that?
Well,
right. That's your next question,
right.
and I think. I think he's somewhat likely to do that. So I wonder, maybe there's a risk because he's going to be so popular, but the guy came in second last year. He won in 16. He had back-to-back tied 11th before that. Like you said, it's the Charlie Hoffman. This record is unbelievable when you look at it, and he's in such good form. I think it's going to be hard for me to go away from him.
Let's try to do a little game theory here on the spot. William Hill has Charlie Hoffman at plus 335 to finish inside the top 10. So that would essentially imply that he's going to do that a little less than like 25% of the time, math off the top of my head. So in that theory, Sia, if we say, okay, he's going to finish inside the top 10, that's he's going to pay for himself 23% of the time. If we project that 25% of people have him, you should not play Charlie Hoffman. If we project that like 18 have him, you should play him. We are obviously splitting hairs, but that would be the game theory behind it.
Yeah, and then I think you could also gauge the upside of those around him that you could pick in place of Charlie Hoffman too. And if their upside, if you consider their upside to be as good or better than Charlie Hoffman, then it's a decent pivot, particularly when you consider ownership percentage.
Okay, we are going to get into the 8K range. We're going to take a quick break first, but before we do, John in the chat wants to know who needs a good result to get into the Masters. Essentially everybody who's not qualified, John, but the ones you're going to hear are Ricky Fowler. Joel Damon's victory did not get him in last week. He still has work to do. Greg, it's if you're not qualified, you got to win. That's the only way, right?
Right. So you're looking at guys that are outside the top 50 in the world. And your last chance, your last hope is winning this event. And we've seen this a number of times in the event before Masters. Traditionally, it's not the Valero Texas Open. It'd be like the Houston Open, where we saw Ian Poulter get a win, and he got into Masters that way. And Matt Jones also comes to mind, getting into Masters by winning the Houston Open. So there are a couple of examples in the past that have kind of created some great stories. And there's a very good possibility that happens again this week, especially with DJ out at this point.
All right, we're going to jump into the $8,000 range. We're going to go deeper. We're going to see if we can find some value. But first, we're going to take a quick break and hear a word from our partners. And we're back. I want to tell you about the all-new Stitcher podcast app. It's been rebuilt from the ground up to make it easier to listen to podcasts on the go or on the revamped web player. That's my favorite part. Stitcher is home to all your favorite podcasts, from classics like My Favorite Murder, This American Life, and How Did This Get Made? That's a good one. All the CBS shows such as Eye on College Basketball, Fantasy Baseball Today, and of course, your favorite, the First Cut Golf Podcast. In Stitcher, you have more control, like setting your download preferences per show and the ability to listen at virtually any speed. 1.25 is the best. Well, with Stitcher, you can listen to podcasts anytime, anywhere. So give the all-new Stitcher a try. Download it in the App Store and at StitcherApp.com/download. $8,000 range. Sia Siwoo Kim, Cam Davis, Lonto Griffin, Chris Kirk, all the way down to the aforementioned Joel Damon, Ricky Fowler, Aaron Wise, and Sam Burns. Who moves the needle for you?
Chris Kirk jumps out me right off the bat. Great recent history, great track record on this course. I like Chris Kirk a lot. Going down a little bit from him to the 8,400 range. I mean, we're talking about ball strikers here. At least I am. And Keegan Bradley is like the ultimate. And by the way, we've talked about how he's also improved with the putter as well. So I think Keegan Bradley is a good play. I actually think that's a great price for Keegan Bradley. Outside of that, although I should point out that Keegan's history here isn't great, while again Chris Kirk's is. The only other guy that maybe I could kick this back to one of you that I'm a little confused about in terms of whether to roster him. We were talking about him glowingly about 6 weeks ago, and now he's sort of fallen off, and that's Sam Burns. I'm really not sure what to do with him, because we know his upside is there. He's just been bad lately. I mean, is it so bad lately that we're not willing to roster him in this tournament at that price?
Let's look at this. I'm showing the tournament logs here, Greg, because something is a red flag, and it's not just all the red that you see on the screen. If you go back and look from essentially the start of 2020, he was dynamite with his driver. I mean, week in, week out, gaining 3 or 4 strokes off the tee. He's been horrific since Phoenix. He lost 2.8 at Phoenix. He was a small gainer at Pebble Beach, and then 3 consecutive events in a row, he's lost strokes off the tee. I find it to be a huge concern and a huge red flag when a golfer loses their best weapon, which is what I think we're seeing from Sam Burns right now.
And I do think it's going to be quite important this week. Which is another factor here. His record here, he's played here twice in the past. In 2015, he missed the cut, which, I mean, that's so long ago. Fortunately for him, it doesn't really matter because he did shoot 89.77. Sorry to bring that up, Sam. But also in 2019, he finished tied 23rd. So he answered quite nicely. But I am concerned about the driver as well. It's one of those Greg Norman courses. You heard what Mark Immelman said, all the rocks off the fairway. And there's, you got to get the ball in play around here. So I have my concerns with Sam Burns. And I think this range offers a lot of positive options. A lot of guys that are in really good form, who also have great course history. So Sam, to me, he's not really moving the needle for me. I think I'm going to stay away.
Yeah, I agree with all the assessment there. Also from Sia, I mean, you look at what Chris Kirk has done in terms of ball striking. So strokes gained ball striking on rickrungood.com. That's not an official PGA Tour stat. It uses off the tee and approach. It combines them. It adds them together for an unofficial stat. And Kirk's gained in 11 of his last 12 measured events. He's just been absolutely awesome with the irons and the driver. And then he's been gaining a bunch of strokes around the green. Like this is a really great profile of a golfer that I like to see. Greg, I'm going to kick this right back to you because on Sunday night you proclaimed, I don't know what you said exactly, but like, watch out for Adam Hadwin. So here's our opportunity to talk about Adam Hadwin.
Yeah, so Adam Hadwin is one of 2 guys in this range, very close in price, that I really, really like. Adam Hadwin does not have the best course history here, which is I wouldn't say it's alarming. It's not to where I'm really worried, where it's an extreme negative. What I really like about Adam Hadwin is the area in the tee to green place, right? He's 116th strokes gained off the tee. I know you're saying that sounds terrible. This can't be good, but his swing is really coming around, and he's working with. I've been watching him on social media, working with his coach Mark Blackburn, who also works with Charlie Hoffman as well. And Max Homa, and he's got this guy swinging really well right now. So I look to a guy like Adam Hadwin, where the statistics like strokes gained approach the green, 186 for the year. These are areas that are not great, but I think it's going to change, and I think it's changing before our eyes. So I look for Adam Hadwin to kind of have a pop-off week and make it back-to-back Canadian Valero Texas Open winners.
If Adam Hadwin wins this week, oh God, I should be careful what I say here because he might win. I was gonna say I'll walk to Canada, but I don't know how far of a walk that is.
Rick, it's too long. We need to hear. I mean,
probably 2,000 miles.
you're the host of a daily podcast, and I don't know, you're in Nevada, so you're walking through the Rockies, right? You got to go basically straight up the Rockies into the Canadian. That's going to be a long walk, and the service is going to be questionable, and we need to hear, so you can't do that.
Can I just add, Rick, that 2 weeks ago, Greg was on Adam Hadwin. It was towards the end of the show, and he talked to us about Mark Blackburn that was working with Adam Hadwin's swing. That was right before the Honda, and guess what place he finished at the Honda?
8th.
There it is, 8th.
I'm looking
so
at
I mean,
it.
there's clearly there's some progression here that we probably need to recognize. And by the way, if you look at his price at 8,300, it seems pretty expensive, right? I mean, he's right under Keegan Bradley, who's been great. You would think an Adam Hadwin type would be in that high 7 or mid 7 range. I think maybe DraftKings is trying to tell us something.
And also the Players Championship was a nice outing for him too. He came in 29th there. So I'm looking at a guy who's really starting to gain some confidence, who's a better player than his statistics would indicate.
I'll chug a bottle of maple syrup.
Ooh.
Oh, here we go. Jacob says, chug a tall boy of Labatt Blue and do it on the pot. Even better. I don't want to chug the syrup. I'll do that.
I kind of like the syrup. I like the syrup.
Oh, man, that's tough. Okay, real quick, because there's two more guys here that I think are worth discussing. We mentioned them both already. It's Ricky Fowler. It's Joel Damon. Sia, I'll go here to you with Fowler because I want to pull up his stats. And we've been waiting for this. We've been waiting for the turnaround for a long time. This is devastatingly bad. The irons, the ball striking. He has lost the putter. 5 straight events he's lost strokes on approach. This is just when you see red in the rickrungood.com database, you're in trouble.
Yeah, there's just really no reason to take Ricky Fowler here. I mean, first of all, if his price was like $7K flat, I think it might be a different conversation because maybe you have some upside here. But let me give you a comparison here. So Ricky Fowler is 75-1 to win this tournament, and he's 8,100. John Huh, who's a guy we're going to talk about in a second, who I like in the 7K range, he's 70-1. Bet like shorter odds than Ricky Fowler. He's 7,400 on DraftKings. Now you're not going to see like a ton of those inconsistencies, price versus odds, but in this case, I feel like that's a commentary on Ricky Fowler more than it is John Huh, perhaps.
Do you think it's crazy, Greg, that like, I mean, I don't remember the exact numbers, but I feel like these ownership numbers in the start of 2021 are essentially the same as Brendan Steele's, and Brendan Steele has 2 top 10s, almost won a golf tournament, hasn't missed a cut, and Ricky Fowler has struggled week in and week out for a year, and we are still looking at like single-digit ownerships for both of these guys.
Right. Well, I mean, you think about what we talked about on Friday night, Rick. We talked about how Jordan Spieth was the only guy left that could make the weekend really interesting and really compelling to watch. And that's what happens. There are certain names on the PGA Tour that draw a lot of attention. They draw attention in fandom. So people root for Ricky Fowler, and you want to see the comeback, so you play him, and you think this is the week. This can't go on for too long. He's too good to perform like this, and so people pick him. And you also feel like the price is really Ricky Fowler's in the 8K range. He should be the highest priced player in the field when it comes to talent. But the form doesn't back that up, and I just think his popularity speaks to what kind of ownerships you get out of him.
All right, let's bop on down to the $7,000 range. Harold Varner III, Ryan Moore, CH3, all the way down to Tom Hoagie, Russell Knox, Luke List, Bryce Garnett, Cam Champ. Here's what I'm going to do, gentlemen. I've opened up the Holy Grail. I've put in a time frame from the start of 2021, and I've sorted these by strokes gained tee to green. And I'm just going to point out the guys, Sia, that are in the $7,000 range here. So Danny Willett's third in this field in strokes gained tee to green in that time frame. He only has 4 rounds. I'm going to keep going. Here's that name you mentioned, John Huh, 17 rounds, pretty decent sample size, $7,400. He's gaining more strokes per round than Brendan Steele, a guy that I just spent a couple minutes telling you how great he is.
And Cameron Tringali, who I just told you, I gave you a couple of minutes about how great he is. Yeah, John Huh is great. I mean, obviously you see it right there that the putter hasn't been doing him any favors, but he's a great ball striker. And at 7,400, I just think he's a great value. I don't know what else to say about him. Again, he's one of those guys that doesn't have any name recognition whatsoever. So I do think that affects his ownership percentage to a degree. But I like him quite a bit.
I talk about the blueprint all the time, Sia. The Honda was his blueprint. If you can see down here at the bottom of the screen, so he goes 4 consecutive events in 2021, just bleeding strokes on the greens, and he gains a half a stroke over 4 rounds at the Honda. That's the blueprint. John Huh to get inside the top 10, to get inside the top 15, whatever you want to call it. He showed it to us in his last start. Now it's a question of whether he can repeat it.
Yeah, absolutely. It absolutely is the blueprint. And like I said, his odds, his sportsbook odds are kind of speaking. It's not like crazy out there, but it's kind of speaking to the fact that this guy that's priced 7,400 maybe should be priced a little bit higher because his odds are reflecting that he's a better golfer than his price.
Continuing down the list, Greg, we run into Matthew Neesmith next. He's got 27 measured rounds. He's at 7,100. Luke List is a flat 7,000. He has 23 rounds under his belt. And then Henrik Norlander is 7,100. He has 27 rounds under his belt. Are any of those guys needle movers for you, or would you prefer somebody else in the 7K range?
No, I'd prefer somebody else.
Okay.
Again, not that I'm necessarily against those guys, and I like the tee to green performance, but again, this is a course where there are a lot of different ways to win, and the guy that stands out to me is Andrew Putnam. Andrew Putnam has, in 2019, he was tied 36. He was tied 8th in 2018, and he's playing some really, really nice golf. The Players' Championship didn't go the way that he hoped, but before that, the API came in 4th. He was 5th in Puerto Rico. He was 7th at the Waste Management. This guy's racked up some really nice performances, and he is a great putter. So I think when you combine a course history, he's clearly comfortable at the course. He's 22nd strokes gained putting on the year. I think Andrew Putnam is a guy in this range that is honestly somewhat safe, and I think the upside's pretty good too.
Yeah, I'm generally not an Andrew Putnam fan because of how he does it with the flat stick. But at some point, you just have to tip your cap to him and say, okay, he gets the job done. To have 3 top 7s and listen to these courses: Phoenix, so that's TPC Scottsdale, Puerto Rico, and then the API. I mean, like, could you get a more diverse set of courses and fields? And that's always a good sign to me, Greg.
Right. It speaks to confidence. He's not a specialist. Like, you have that area on your site, the grass specialists, where you're and those are guys that play well at certain areas. And I wouldn't consider him to be in that category, which is a good thing. So the sign is his game is traveling. It's performing at a somewhat consistent basis, and it's a good opportunity to come off of a miscut at a Players' Championship and come back ready to go and rekindle some of that form that he had in Puerto Rico and in Orlando.
Yeah, not only do you get the specialist, you get the anti-specialist, which fortunately for Andrew Putnam, he does not show up on either one of those lists, which is usually a good thing. It means he's right there in the middle. Okay, Sia, the rest of the 7K range, I mean, I see names like Benny On, Sebastian Munoz. I see Phil Mickelson is in this field, Denny McCarthy. This is, of course, the largest tier that we usually get of playable players on DraftKings. So is there anybody else we need to consider here?
Denny McCarthy is interesting. We've had some conversations about him, but a couple guys right off the bat. Brandon Grace, I think is maybe sort of in the midst of a comeback here. He's got a great track record on this course, but his recent history outside of the Players is actually pretty good as well. And by the way, if there are windy conditions here, which I expect them to be in that 15 mile per hour range, I think Brandon Grace will be fine with those. The only other guy I'd probably like to mention, because he has popped here and there, I just noticed on your anti-grass specialist, he was either 1 or 2. He was 2 behind Patia. There it is, Doug Ghim. I just think it's a really good price for Doug Ghim if he gives us anywhere near the upside he's given us in the last 4 or 5 weeks.
Yeah, and I was kind of on Doug Gim the week after. I don't want to call it the meltdown. I mean, the guy played with JT on a Sunday at the Players Championship. Like anybody can melt down there, but like I was kind of on him the next week for a lot of the reasons of how consistent he has been, Sia, and I think he missed the cut the next week. But this might be a good opportunity for him to just kind of reset, get back to his strengths. It's a much weaker field, all that good stuff. I think it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, and consider his price too. I mean, there were a couple tournaments ago, you were paying a very high mark for Doug Gim. Now he's at a price where he's really just getting thrown in your lineup while you're stacking guys that are in the 8 and 9K range. So the price is really appealing to me as well.
I've got to point out Sam Ryder. He's 7,400. Yes. Yeah, he's got back-to-back top 10s, Greg. He goes 8th at Honda. He goes runner-up at Punta Cana. He's made the cut in his last 2 trips, his only 2 trips to the Texas Open. Does he keep that momentum going?
Well, I was going to ask you the same question, but since you flipped it on me, I have to say I have to lean towards yes. And the reason is the way where is he strong, right? What are the areas he's strong in? And what I love about your site, Rick, is how when you do your stats breakdown of a player, it tells you what they're best in because of the way that you have it ordered. So greens of regulation, he's 15th. Strokes gained approach to green, he's 38th. Driving accuracy, he's 80. So those are the areas where he's really strong, the tee to green areas. And that tells me this may be more of good form than just simply a hot streak. So I think there is something here to Sam Ryder, and the price does not reflect a guy who just finished back-to-back weeks inside the top 10. So maybe you can kind of sneak a guy in there who's on good form and maybe a little underpriced.
Yeah, we don't have his shot link data at Punta Cana, but he was brilliant at Honda. I mean, it's almost a perfect stat profile for what I'd be looking for, and that's not uncommon. He has gotten hot with the irons before, always a great sign. So Sam Ryder, I agree. If you maybe choose, I think he's gonna keep it going. I don't know if he's gonna finish in the top 10 again, but I do like his chances. $6,000 range. This is Nate Lashley, Rafael Campos in the field, Pat Perez, Kevin Chappell, all the way down. Who's min price this week? Ooh, Hunter Mahan, Kevin Stadler, Davis Love III, DJ Trahan. Wow, there's a lot of guys at the min price. Sia, who moves the needle in the 6K range?
I have a few guys here. Kevin Chappell, I believe his history here is pretty good, and he's been playing a lot better. I mean, Kevin Chappell was sort of on the radar 3-4 years ago and just sort of fell off. But yeah, I just saw the recent history. It's great. I mean, for a guy in this range, it's great. I like Roger Sloan as well, Akshay Bhatia. And if I'm really going super low, because I got to fit somebody in, and I don't think you have to do that in this tournament, but David Hearn and Tyler Duncan. The thing with Tyler Duncan is he usually has a good first and second round and then just completely fades in rounds 3 and round 4. So maybe he's a better showdown guy for rounds 1 and 2 if that's what you're interested in. But he is generally accurate off the tee and he's generally a good approach player. So that's a guy. I think he's 6,300. Would fit nicely in your lineup.
Here's the Kevin Chappell history. He goes runner-up in 2011. He tacks on a 15th place finish in 2013. 2016, he finishes 4th. And oh, by the way, hoists the trophy in 2017 before finishing 30th in 2018. That's the last time he played. He did not play last year, so absolutely right, Sia. He is rolling in terms of course history. Greg, $6,000 range. Who do you like?
So I have 2 guys here that I want to talk about. One is am I crazy question. I don't think I am. I want to get your thoughts. And the other is a random pick that has no statistical basis. And this may be another, if he wins, I'll drink a bottle of syrup or something like that. And I have a funny story that goes along with that, how I got to this. So Jim Furyk is the guy that I'm looking at. I think there's a opportunity for him to perform pretty well. I don't know if he has an opportunity to win, but he's an amazing competitor, and he has a great record here. For a guy who has the PGA Tour experience that he has, he's only played 6 events here. His worst finish is T58, so he's never missed the cut. He has a T3, T6 in 2013, 2014, and his last finishes are a tied 26th and a tied 23rd in 18 and 19. So it's a guy who's familiar with the course. And if you look at what he's done recently on the PGA Tour, Honda Classic didn't go the way that he hoped, but he came in 26th at the Genesis. He came in 21st at the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am. And I'm wondering if those kind of courses where short game is a little more valuable, distance isn't a prerequisite, if this is a sign that the guy's just playing some good golf. So I kind of like going with a Jim Furyk. This is the kind of course where I think you could get a veteran, he or maybe even a Zach Johnson, who's in the 8K range. I think those two guys are really interesting to me this week.
So I think there's at least 2 par 5s on this course that are over 600 yards. And I wonder if, since those are kind of 3-shot holes for everybody, if guys like Furyk who can just, okay, well, this was going to be a 3-shotter for me anyway, and I was going to hit a wedge in there from, 100 yards, like that might not be so bad. What's most impressive, Greg, is like you look at his year by year, like this guy is just as good with his irons now as he was like 6 years ago. Like he is defying. Like how is that possible?
It's really good. He is just but Mark would call him a flusher. It's one of those guys, the swing, it doesn't look like it. You wouldn't think of him as a great ball striker, but hearing the sound of Jim Furyk hit a ball is impressive. It's just impressive. There's no face rotation in that swing, and that's why it lasts so long. So I wouldn't be surprised if he had a great week this week. Let me give you my story. This is like kind of these are the numbers, right? This is like the lotto pick, a sign from somewhere else. Well, so I'm sitting there on Sunday. I'm looking at my computer. I have the field up in front of me and it has pictures. Right? I'm scrolling through who's playing this week, just kind of getting my feet wet. And my son, who comes up in this episode yet again, he comes over and says, "Dad, are you looking at golfers?" And he's saying, "Are you, who won?" And it's just so random. I said, "Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out. Who's going to win?" And so he sits on my lap and I'm scrolling through and he points. He says, "Him." And he points to, drum roll please, Ted Potter Jr.
TPJ.
Yep. So I wanted to get that out there. If Ted Potter Jr. wins, you can credit my 3-year-old son, Mac. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, Ted Potter Jr., maybe you take a roll on that.
TPJ rocking and rolling. I had one, I don't ever remember my dreams. I don't really ever, I just never remember them. The one dream that I remember is the dream was that I won a Keegan Bradley ticket at 66-1, and it like changed my life, and I was like a millionaire after that. And when I woke up, I checked Keegan's number that week, and he was like, I swear he was like 66-1 or 70-1. And I was like, oh my God, like this is it. I've got this. I was like, this is it. I've got my sign. Boom, boom, boom. I'm pretty sure he never even sniffs the cut line. He was like finished like 130th. But yeah, sometimes they work out. Sometimes they don't.
So let's go with Ted Potter Jr. this week.
Perfect. Love it. Sia, I had Roger Sloan picked up here because while it hasn't been a lot of great for Roger Sloan, he's the only guy in the $6,000 range that can boast 3 consecutive top 25 finishes. And if you could pencil me in for a top 25 finish from anybody in the 6K range, especially someone like Sloan, who I believe is 6,700, I would take it and sprint away from you.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was looking at too. I mean, his recent form is great. He doesn't have much of a track record here. Miscut in 2019. That's all I see. So again, 3 top 25s in the last 3 tournaments. Again, we might be dealing with some wind. He obviously had no problem with that last week at the Corrales. So he's just a guy that kind of pops for me because he might be in a form that would really dictate, hey, maybe this is a 7K guy and he's just, at a 6K price right now.
Okay, gentlemen, before we get out of here, any other 6K flyers that we need to touch on?
Well, I can't go an entire show without mentioning Cam Percy's name. So nice. Cam Percy is maybe a safe, limited upside play that I'll probably have in a lineup or two.
See what his headshot looks like. Does he look intimidating? Oh, yeah. See, of course he does. Oh, that's tough. No, maybe not.
So I got one other for our viewers. This is not a 6K guy. This is now cycling back to guys we missed. Do we have to get into Carlos Ortiz?
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Yes. Carlos Ortiz came up in the chat. Ho tan. Carlos Ortiz. Greg, thank you very much for bringing that up. So let's talk about Carlos Ortiz, who is in the midst of his best driving season of his career. The game's coming around. It's his best overall season of his career. He makes a ton of eagles. Greg, is there anything else that stands out to you about young Carlos Ortiz?
Interesting thing about Ortiz is he won the last event before the week before the Masters, right? With the
yeah.
Vivint Houston Open. And I don't know, it may be another parallel to use Sia's term, take a stroll down narrative street. That would be interesting. And it would, for Carlos Ortiz, it would be another completely overshadowed victory where you don't even remember it because DJ came in second and Masters is the next week, and as soon as that gets like swept under the rug right away, because again it's the last final before before summer break, everybody's mind is on Masters. But Carlos Ortiz here, he does have one really nice finish, which is a tied 15th in 2015, where, believe it or not, he shot 79 in the first round and came in tied 15th.
Wow.
So it's a golf course that can play tough, and it can bring a lot of guys in. But Carlos Ortiz is having a great year. I think he's an interesting candidate.
He really is. So after the win in Houston, he backed it immediately up with an 8th place finish at Mayakoba. Finished 14th at Sony, 4th at Phoenix, and another 15th place finish at the Workday, the WGC. This is a pretty good stretch of golf
kid
that
can
most
play.
people probably don't understand he's going through.
Yeah, he can really play. I wouldn't look past him. He's not a bad pick.
Sweet. See ya. Final thoughts? You good?
I'm good. Let's go. This is the warm up to the Masters as far as I'm concerned. So let's get warmed up.
All right. That'll do it for our DFS preview for this week's Valero Texas Open. Big thanks to producer Jacob behind the scenes. That right there is Sia Nejad. You can find him on Twitter at Sia Nejad. It's Greg DuCharme, who you can get all the hottest NERF takes at The Real GFD. And you can find me at Rick Run Good. This has been The First Cut, and we'll catch you next time.